Hi, everyone, and welcome back. What's next on the agenda, Rich?
Well, if I can, I'm going to jump back just for a second. But I was looking for the agencies, and I couldn't find it in my notes until I went back a little further. But the present or threatened destruction, modification, or curtailment of habitat or range, and the key word is present. So the service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, has already agreed that the activities that threaten habitat are largely historic. Present activities are controlled by laws and governments. You want to hear what protects the frog right now? You have the Wilderness Act, the Federal Powers Act, the Clean Water Act, the State Endangered Species Act, the California Practice Act, the Sierra Nevada Forest Plan Amendment, and the Hatchery and Stocking Program, EIR and EIS. And that doesn't even include the agencies that are out there to protect them. But for Amador County, we're looking at about 109,000 acres that would be impacted by this. And the problem is, as I said, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wants to get the approximate entire geographical area within Amador County instead of looking at just that area that is impacted. So,
okay, so it's a lot of maybe overreach or not overreach, but too big of a size if they're addressing a problem. It's in an area where we don't even have the frogs.
That's right. They want, and they're not analyzing the areas appropriately, as I said, looking at those areas. In fact, the California Fish and Wildlife Service are still stocking Bear River Lake and Silver Lake, which shows that they don't feel there's a problem there with the frog because they're man-made lakes.
Okay.
So, doesn't make any sense. Next up, this is going to be quick. We're going to talk about use of Quimby Act fees to pay for a shed at Molly Joyce Park. I'm not even sure this should be coming back to the board. It seems like it could be handled in the district, in District 3. But I know what's going to happen here. There's not enough money allocated. There's currently about $9,600 in the District 3 Quimby Act funds. It can be used for that shed project. The estimate for just the concrete and the wood is coming out at about $11,300. So what they're going to do is see if they can ask supervisors to take money out of their Quimby Act funds. Frankly, I'm not very inclined to do that.
Would you explain to the viewers who might not be, up to speed on Quimby quickly? What is the Quimby Act?
Quimby Act fees are fees that when you develop, you're required to put fees into the Quimby Act. Because of the Quimby Act, you're required to contribute those fees. Those fees and go in, and this is what might stop use outside of District 3 anyway. Those fees go into the district where they came from, and technically they're supposed to go back to the district where they came from unless you can show a very good preponderance of evidence that the whole county utilizes that park. For instance, Howard Park and Ione, it might qualify, but predominantly Howard Park's going to be used by the people that live in District 2 and predominantly the people who live in Ione. So even then it would be a stretch, even though you get hundreds of kids, literally thousands of kids during soccer season now.
And these aren't the supervisor's discretionary funds?
No, absolutely not.
All right, just want to clear that. Okay.
But the discretionary funds obviously could be used for this, but that's a whole new topic.
You'd ask for that, right? Okay.
Right. We have the hazardous materials area plan coming back, and this is the Annex B to the Emergency Operations Plan. Our Environmental Health Department, as the Cooper, the Certified Unified Planning Agency, is required to have a plan for emergency operations and specifically to hazardous materials. They're required to update that plan periodically. So Mike Israel with Environmental Health is bringing this back and has to do the update by running this by different agencies out there, fire agencies, EMS agencies, so that they comment on this. And then it comes back to the board for approval. All the changes in here are redlined. I've looked at it, gone through it fairly quickly the first time, but most of the changes are not significant. They're more for clarification than anything else.
Okay.
So on this item...
But that goes like into the emergency plans, right? And doesn't that show where the hazardous materials are stored in the county and different maybe ranches and farms, things like that?
You're talking about fuels, you're talking about
Right.
chemicals. People need to understand, our county's not a big fan of the Coupa program,
Right.
but the Coupa is responsible for the health and safety of these EMS people when they go out.
Right.
And that's very important. And for all the people that have to fill out their forms, it's very important that if they have a fire on their ranch, let's say one of their barns is burning down, if you had a relative who was a firefighter or ran an ambulance, would you want them going into a building when they don't know that there's hazardous chemicals stored in this one area that may either blow up or emit chemicals and put everyone at risk? So it's very necessary in that respect.
Right, and I think it would also, you know, maybe not in the old days, but it would be harder for people to know. But with computers and things like that, they could check probably on their way and things like that to know what they're up against.
Well, they actually have these plans. So when they get a fire
So
in a
does that
location,
mean a rancher has to keep his things in this area that he says that's where I keep them?
yes.
Okay.
He's got
Well,
the plan says
common
they have to
sense.
keep them in a certain area, and they have to mark them. They have to identify what's in those. Now, obviously, you got a gas tank outside. That's pretty easy, but it has to be marked too. It's more things like the acetylene bottles for welding. They need to know where those are when they walk in,
Right.
because those things, if you have a fire, are going to explode.
Okay.
The chemicals out there, which every vineyard in this county has a lot of chemicals they use by necessity. So
Right.
this was distributed September 25th, and just coming back to us now after the recommended changes have been made. The board will have a chance to go through this and comment on those changes, and then decide if they want to accept it at the meeting on Tuesday.
Okay.
Last item up is somewhat of a rehash, but we're going back to the proposed 15.10 limited density owner belt rural dwelling
Okay.
proposed ordinance. All the changes are made now, and I don't think the board will be making too many more changes. I still want clarification on one area, and that is basically the number one under the ordinance is portions of the unincorporated areas of the county are predominantly rural and of limited density with suitability for urbanization, limited by their distance from and access to urban areas. Sounds to me like we're still kind of opening these up to the whole county, and I think it should be really focused on those urban areas that are at a distance away from.
Was that a way of stating, though, in the same way that the rural areas where people live, that most likely they are not going to be getting a lot of heavy density or anything there because of the zoning that we have?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it's in those areas where, what I would call more remote locations in
Okay,
the county
that's it.
rather than rural areas of the county, because it says specifically here they're limited by their distance from and access to urban areas. So whose discretion is it then? I think it's going to be ours.
Pine Grove's not urban, is it?
I would say not, but there are some areas where it may be difficult for them to find their way to center of Pine Grove or to Jackson. So
Okay.
that's it. Who makes the call? I think it's going to be our community development director.
Okay.
And if that's the case, we may not always have Aaron Bruce Torrey who understands this plan. We may have a new community development director.
Right. The meaning's in the words, and you have to make sure what the words mean.
That's right. And that's what I want to make sure of, that it's not up to discretion with someone who has very little knowledge of it, or up to, I should say, more so than discretion, up to interpretation.
Okay.
Because different people interpret different things, and they will use their discretion then to act on that. So I don't, when I'm off the board down the road, I anticipate Mr. Bruce Torrey is going to be around for a while, but down the road when I'm off the board, and board members aren't going to be around who remember this, maybe our community development director will be gone. Are they going to interpret it the same way that
So has this
we're
been
looking at it?
written with a tighter language or more meaningful language in what's going to be passing?
Well, I want to make sure it's specific enough
Okay.
so that people have the same understanding of it now as they will have in 20 years. Because
Okay, well, you want them to take an originalist look at that, huh?
well, I just want to be sure that it's understood by all and will be
Well,
understood
that's-
in the future.
If it's not a good law, if it's not understandable.
That's-
Let's just,
well,
you know,
and if
and by normal people using regular language.
And
I
if
would
it's
say.
not specific enough so that people understand this is the intent of it.
Okay, right. Intent is very important.
Right. So Supervisor Plaz and Neto brought this to us from the Public Works Committee. They'll be bringing it back, and then we'll have a discussion on it tomorrow. I'm going to talk more about the definitions here and the intent, because I want that intent to be clear.
Right. Okay. And I think where you're coming from is basically some remote areas, the cabins in the upper reaches of the county, things like that.
I think that was the original.
More so than homes on 10 acres or 5 acres or things like that.
Right. That was the original intent, because if people don't understand what this is about, they really need to pick it up and read it. It will do things like, it goes back to permissible things we can do within the law, like not require fire sprinklers in a house, like allow limited building inspections to occur during the building of the structure. Of course, we want the structure to be built to health and safety standards,
sure,
and we hope there will be, but you know, a preliminary check and at the office and a final check at the end, you're not going to see what's in the walls or anything else. So you anticipate people are going to do things right. That's one of the other concerns. You're relying on people to do what's right, and sometimes when people are under limited budgets or things like that, they tend to skirt the law.
Well, my son does some remodeling work, a lot of that right now down in San Diego, and he says, in a way, not bring this up, but when inspectors come out to check a lot of stuff, they'll say, "Oh, so is this the nail pattern you're going to use through the whole house? Okay, then fine. Then it looks like you know what you're doing," and things like that. Mm-hmm. So they are trying, also the larger counties, like I'm saying, trying to, I won't say shortcut it, but get it so that building can get in and not cost a lot of money. Right. Because building fees and everything, it's harder to get things done.
Well, and that's most people's complaint with the building department is they don't want their property super analyzed. Everybody wants to be treated alike, so that if you're doing things you feel are right, they don't want county to come in and super analyze and start going off in a tangent and making you, and a lot of this is personalities. I mean, inspectors are people too, and they're going to look at individuals, and sometimes personalities can get in the way.
As we hear, some are like this, some are like that. Okay. Yeah. Richard, thanks for coming by.
Hey, Tom.
And if you can, join that meeting tomorrow at the Board of Supervisors. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.